Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss about the overview of disaster management. Disaster management is an organizing or management of resources and the responsibilities for dealing with all aspects of emergencies. In particular, the preparedness for disaster, response after the disaster, and also recovery. These are very much crucial. So, we'll discuss about a little overview of the disaster management, and in the next coming videos we can discuss more about the disaster management. So when it comes to disaster, the definition is actually the disruption of the functioning of a community or a society that contains humans, materials, economical development, environmental loss and impacts. Disaster exceeds the ability of the affected community or the society. So there are different kinds of disasters. First, they are the natural disasters, which include earthquake, floods, hurricanes, cyclones, tsunamis, drought, volcanic eruption, landslides, and wildfires. Again, these are categorized into hydrological, which are dealing with water, like flash floods, tsunamis, and all. When it comes to the meteorological, it is cyclones, heat waves, drought, and storms. And the same way, when it is categorized into geological natural disaster, then it would be earthquake, landslide, volcanic eruption. And when it comes to the biological, it can be epidemics, pandemic like COVID-19, and also pest attack. The same way, when we go to the other type, it is human-made, or it is also called as anthropogenic disasters. In this, we have industrial accidents like chemical spills or nuclear accidents, transportation accidents like air crashes, train derailments, and urban hazards like fires, building collapse, and war, terrorism, and also civil unrest. And when it comes to the hybrid disasters, it is something like climate change. That means it is both a mix of natural disaster and a human-made disaster. Now we'll discuss about the phases of a disaster. So usually, phase of a disaster management is represented as like a main phases. In that, before a disaster, we need to take the mitigation. It is like the main aim is to minimize the risk and reduce the impact of a disaster. Just like if you take a flooded area, so if you are building some kind of walls or protection canals so that the area will not be affected by the floods. And when it comes to earthquakes, you can construct infrastructure that are earthquake resistant, and we can also go for the land use planning and also following the environmental regulations. And when it comes to the preparedness is also same. It is something like before a disaster. So we are making ourselves ready to respond effectively. They are like emergency drills and training, or stockpiling the supplies like food, water, everything. So when a disaster happens, we need to nourish ourselves with those food, and also we can go for the evacuation planning, and most importantly, public awareness campaigns about the upcoming disasters. So these two parts, mitigation and preparedness, are before a disaster. And if something happens, some disaster occurs, so we need to go for the response. That is, it can be during a disaster or it can be immediately after a disaster. This is to save their lives and meet the intermediate needs of the affected populations. In this, emergency medical services, research and rescue operation, shelter and food distribution, communication and coordination efforts are mainly involved. And when it comes to the recovery is something like after disaster, to restore normal life and rebuild the community. So it is like infrastructure rebuilding, psychological support, economic recovery plans, and long-term solutions of housing and all. So in this next stage is the key components for the disaster management, that is risk assessment. We need to identify the vulnerabilities and hazards. So we can use GIS or remote sensing or even drone images to identify the risk prone areas. And next comes planning. In the planning, it involves developing comprehensive disaster management plans that can be local or regional or national. And sometimes you need to have a planning for scenario based simulations also. And then next comes the coordination. There must be a coordination between the government, NGO, private sectors, and communities. And also, the most important thing is we need to establish emergency operation centers. So these centers will get the information from the affected people, and it will be forwarded to the higher authorities for a risk recovery or preparedness or mitigation or response. And finally comes the communication and capacity building. We need to clear the channels for the public warnings. Crisis communication protocols have to be followed. And in the capacity building, training should be provided to the emergency responders. And there is a purpose to build resilient communication through education. When it comes to disaster risk reduction, it is a strategic approach that is aimed at reducing the vulnerabilities and disaster risk to prevent or at least minimize the adverse impact of the hazards. There can be strategies like climate change adaptation, sustainable urban development, ecosystem based approach, or sometimes community based disaster risk management. So these are to understand disaster risk, strengthening the governance, investing in the disaster risk reduction, and enhancing the preparedness. Now, in recent years, the technology has developed a lot, and this same technology is used in disaster management also. We can have GIS and remote sensing to map a hazardous area, or at least to assess the damaged areas. And also we have recent development of drones, so we can go for aerial surveys or to deliver the supplies in places where there is no access. And after that, the recent development AI and data analytics, we can do the predictive modeling, and also we can go for early warning systems. And there are also mobile applications through which we get the real-time alerts, and social media in which the public communication and the citizens are reporting about the disasters that are happening. Thank you.